Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
Are we accountable for our family's decisions or for our clones' decisions? And what responsibility do we have to care for our alien half-brothers? Well, these are the kinds of questions we're going to be asking today as we talk about some of the big things going on new in our favorite fandoms today, as we're going to discuss Bad Batch Season 3, Invincible Season 2, Part 2, and even something maybe a lot of y'all haven't heard of, Mortal Terror. Excited for that one. It's going to be a wild ride today. Hey, if you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, go ahead and shout out where you're listening from, and we'll announce it as you pop up, if you pop up. But before we do anything else, I got to do a big thank you to one of our supporters, one of our sponsors of the show, Justin Vaughn. You make this show possible. You rock, dude. Thank you so much for your contribution. And if anybody wants to be like Justin, get a shout out, you can do that on Patreon, Captivate, or Apple Podcasts. So thank you all. I'm Joshua Noel. I am here with one of your other hosts, one of the newer hosts, John Erdely. Not new to me, though. We've known each other since college, and this is the first time we've recorded together, so this is kind of exciting. John, good to see you, man.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Joshua. It has been a long time since we've been able to meet face to face, and we always had great experience together in college, and now we are taking our experiences outside of college into the real world and meeting back in a creative way, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And now all of the maybe the odder conversations that we would have that were more just like, small group at college, now we're subjecting other people to listen. To it. Good times. Hey guys, if you're all listening to the podcast and you want to go over to Podchaser or Spotify or Apple Podcasts to rate and review the show, that helps a whole lot. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It really helps when you smash that like button, because when you don't smash the like and subscribe, you do smash Will's heart, and no one wants that. So go ahead and do that. I do have a comment. So Christian wanted us to know that he's listening from Christian's dorm room in Louisville. Christian,
Louisville, Kentucky.
Glad you're watching. One of my favorite things in Louisville, my family lives in like the Kentucky region. In the University of Louisville, they have a wall that's just like all the different pronunciations of Louisville or
Louisville.
Yeah, everybody pronounces it different. It's fine. So one thing we like to do for our What's News episodes, we do some stuff a little bit different. Instead of what we're geeking out on, we're going to go ahead and have a lightning round. And that's just where we're kind of discuss stuff that's not our main three that we've been into recently, if you have anything. I got a few that I'd highlight. This isn't really new, I guess. It came out last year, but I'm just now getting around to, because I've been really resistant to Peacock because I just have too many subscriptions. Like, to me, it's just a problem. Like, I'm just tired of subscribing to so many things, but I got access to somebody else's. I mean, I totally have my own subscription, but Peacock has Twisted Metal. So the old PlayStation video games that has its show, and it's starring Anthony Mackie and all of them. And I was like, the cast is brilliant. So I was like, I got to check it out. And I haven't heard anything about it, so I wasn't expecting great things. But honestly, I think it's pretty good. It's really entertaining, a lot of fun. Definitely kind of like teenage boy humor, but I mean, it's about the Twisted Metal game, so it better have teenage boy humor. Like that's sort of the point. So I'm really enjoying that one. Do you have anything that you wanted to lift up that's not our main three today?
I've been we've been watching One Piece with the kids, and I never had a chance to really get into One Piece, even though I did have a subscription to Shonen Jump magazine as a kid. And I'd read it a little bit, but I never did watch the anime. And now this year we're dedicated to culturing our kids on all the kind of the popular animes. And One Piece we've watched through. We're almost done with season 2, and it's actually really fun, really engaging, and I really, really like this anime. I feel like it has a lot of great character depth that goes into their backstories.
Yeah.
All the new places that they explore are always fun and full of like these crazy things. Like we just finished up them going to the island with the dinosaurs and the giants, and it's just like, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, wild stuff, and that's part of why I love the live action One Piece is because it's, even though it's obviously it's not as good, not as true to the original, all that stuff, but it's a good excuse to like get back into a world for me that I've like. It's hard to be like, oh, I'm gonna restart the anime when you're like, I'm on episode 1000 and I still have like 200 to go, and it's like feels weird to go back to episode 1. But the live action gives me like a good excuse to kind of revisit those early years, and I do love that part of the story. It's like they really do a great job just world building and introducing the characters, and it's a lot of fun. I'm trying to think of some of the other stuff I've been into. I'm going to talk about this on our comic book catch-up episode later this week, but I'm really digging the Doctor Strange comics that have been coming out lately, and just kind of dealing with like PTSD and the idea of the ultimate victor of war versus what it really means to be a doctor. So it's just a lot of like fun getting into kind of Doctor Strange getting back to being a doctor and what it means to be a healer in the kind of world that he lives in now. And man, it's fun. It's just fun to explore that. That's basically it. Hunger in the Dust was still great. G. Willow Wilson's fantastic. Everything she does is amazing. This is Christian agreeing with me about something.
Huh.
This is crazy. Christian agrees with me about the Doctor Strange one. Thank you, Christian. But no, yeah, I'm mostly revisiting old stuff. I am, however, really looking forward to Godzilla x Kong. So I have rewatched all those movies recently to kind of prep for Godzilla Kong. Are you into the Godzilla universe, the legendary monsters, or any of that?
Yeah. Then there was Kong, Skull Island. I think there was another one caught up on yet. I'm incorrect. I think because Godzilla x Kong is the follow up to Godzilla, right?
First Kong, yeah. I think there's 4 total in it. So there's like a original Godzilla legendary film, Kong Skull Island, Godzilla King of the Monsters, then Godzilla vs. Kong, and now Godzilla X Kong. I still feel like Kong deserves a second solo film, but the way the commercials look really makes it feel like this is going to be primarily a Kong film, and Godzilla's just going to kind of give him some backup. But I don't know. We'll see.
Looks good.
Yeah, it does. I'm really excited. And it's coming out Easter weekend, and I'm like, I have some extra time off that weekend. I can go to the theater more than once. We'll see. Really, money might dictate how many times I see it. You know how that goes.
Oh yeah, it's like $50 to go to the theater.
Yeah, I'm not doing all that. All right. Well, with that, go ahead and end our lightning round and move on to a different topic, something a little bit different this go round. I'm not going to be covering this in comic book catch up. Here's a comic book series I'm adding to our What's New lineup because I honestly, I just think the idea behind it, maybe not necessarily the story itself yet, but the idea that it's setting up is so interesting. And from my memory / just kind of listening to some other episodes, I was like, I think John might have some interesting commentary on the story they're setting up in Mortal Terror by Christopher Golden and Tim Laban. So I got to be honest with you guys. I originally just picked it up because that issue 1 cover right there, to me, looks a lot like Mike Mignolia's Hellboy, and I love him. And I was like, looks similar enough. I needed a good new horror comic because Ice Cream Man is taking forever to release a new issue. Sorry, just personal gripes. So I picked it up and I was like, yeah, let's see what this is. And John, I'm gonna break this down for you, and you're gonna be like, that's one of the weirdest stories I've heard, but I still feel like it makes sense.
Lay it on me.
So here we are. It takes a second to figure it out. So it starts in a train, which for those of you who know me at all, like I just have a thing for trains. Like I love trains. So stories start on a train. I'm like, all right, starting off strong. We got train story. The guy's like, oh, there's monsters. He can kind of tell that something's going on. He's like, and he's an investigator. He ditches the train. The train ends up exploding. Crazy stuff. And you're like, okay. Some different conversation clues kind of hinting at, you're like, okay, it's vampires. That's what's happening. And then you find out, no, everyone's vampires. It was humans that blew up the train. But people don't believe in humans in this world. They think that the humans are all gone and everyone's a vampire. So everything's ruled by vampires. The leader of the vampire world, the king, does know that humans still exist, or mortals is what they call them. But he doesn't want the rest of the population to know. So he's kind of keeping it on the down low that humans are still out there. It kind of gets out a little bit amongst like the army kind of private security kind of things of like, we are going to investigate, take care of this without the rest of the population finding out. And the mortals are also terrorists because, there's not enough mortals left to do a full-on war with vampires. So what do? Hereby there, we're going to blow up a train. We're going to, disrupt the establishment, and the establishment is all vampires. So all of the world is happening underground because, the whole sun thing. And it's very traditional vampire. Like, I love some of the stuff that I'm like, okay, I'm tired of, like, our vampires being like, oh, yeah, instead of 2 pointy teeth, they have all pointy teeth. Or, oh, we're going to all sparkle. I'm like, no, just give me a traditional vampire. And this is traditional vampires, but the story is anything but traditional, right? So, they're having to get blood bags, all the stuff for their food because they don't have humans. You have the main protagonist. I don't remember his name. His partner, I guess you'd say. Spouse. They're not married yet. So his partner actually is having a side fling with a human, it turns out, because there's like the thrill of being with someone mortal is like a whole thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. And then you piece together that what's supposed to be so scary, magic has reversed. At some point, somehow, magic's reversed here. And if a human bites a vampire, they can turn a vampire mortal. So now, the terror isn't really just that they're going to get blown up. The terror is they can become mortal. And the idea of mortality is scarier than anything else. So you get the thrill, the passion of being with someone who could possibly die. You get the terror, the fear of just the idea of death itself. And issue 2, near the end, Will loves a good last panel cliffhanger. We find out who the leader of the human terrorists are. Dracula. Dracula is the leader of the human terrorists. So yeah, everything's upside down. But the main reason I wanted to bring it up is because A, I wanted, as a storyteller, to kind of get your take. And then B, I like the idea of just kind of discussing, is mortality scarier than what we usually think of as like the monsters? So first, as far as like a just a premise for a story, how does this sit with you, John?
This sounds like a nice, kind of a breath of fresh air creative take on flipping the vampire world upside down, where all the roles are kind of reversed in what you would think of a traditional vampire story, where, usually it's humans, innocent humans being attacked by the bloodthirsty, chaotic evil vampires. And this time it's kind of the reverse, where the vampires are the norm, and the idea of humans is is kind of been turned into this myth. And that sounds really interesting way to do it. Flips the idea on its head, and also the idea that a human remove the mortality of them, or remove the immortality. That would be scary for someone. And that reminds me of the Cylons in Battlestar Galactica, where they were really terrified because then they wouldn't be able to resurrect themselves, and they're really terrified of the idea of like not being able to be reborn.
Yeah. At first I'm trying not to I'm trying to be generous. At first though, when I read it, I was like, oh, they just said, what if we reversed vampires? And to me, that just feels like a lazy premise. Like, we're just going to take it. And what if we just did it backwards? I'm like, because I just feel like too many people do that. Like, we're just going to take the story, do it backwards. What if Superman was evil? You know, I'm like, I'm tired of the, like, let's just do the opposite of the story. But then once it started getting at like those deeper themes of like mortality is actually scary. The thing that actually makes, love making or, romance worth something is the fact that you are mortal. So like without it, the passion isn't there if it's just two immortal people because there is no real risk there. And I'm like, oh man, this is so weird. They also have some like experiments and stuff going on, but they haven't fleshed out that part of the story enough for me to comment on it. So I'm just going to leave that alone. But that guy on the right on issue 2, he was in an insane asylum or something. I'm unsure. Yeah, I thought it was a little weird with the Dracula bit. I'm like, I wish you would have created your own character. But I think it plays really well to the theme of just like classic vampires. So trying to keep it classical. And when I say classic, I mean to the extent that when the magic reversed, humans have to ask permission before they're allowed to enter a room, like a house. So it's pretty interesting. All right, Christian is here again with us. Christian, we should have just sent you the link, man. All right, so he said, it sounds like a very compelling read. I like the reversal on the usual formula of human beings being in the minority this time around and can control vampires' mortality through a bite. Yeah, that's actually what's interesting. And I've often actually wondered that when I've watched or read other vampire stuff, because I'm like, wait a minute. You telling me I could just get bit by something and live forever? That's not really that scary when you think about it. Like, yeah, it is because there's monsters out there to get you, but never dying. I think I can live with that.
The trade-off.
Literally. Yeah. Whereas this is, I have this assumption that I'm going to live forever, that nothing can change that unless someone literally just cuts my head off or something. And now, all of a sudden, all my assumptions get challenged, and I could die at any minute because someone could just turn me mortal. Like, I myself cannot put myself in the mindset of someone who is immortal. Like, because we grow up finite beings, we grow up with the idea, maybe as a young child you don't think about death, but eventually we've all come to a place where we've accepted we're going to die one day. So it's hard to put yourself in this mentality of you've never had to confront mortality at all. And how scary is mortality if you've never confronted it? I love the concept. Before we go any further, I'm going to rate 0 out of 10. So far, I'm giving this a 9. I love the way it's written, the way it's drawn. I think everything about this is just fantastic comic book writing. It's why I love comics. Now, to the deeper stuff, the Christian tradition, Christian theology, we have for a very long time wrestled with how to deal with mortality and what we think about it, what we think about an afterlife, or if there's an afterlife, all that kind of stuff. John, like as a Christian, how do these questions of mortality and the fear of being mortal really sit with you? Like, how do you think about these things, wrestle with them yourself?
Well, I'm not sure how to compare it to like, the Christian standpoint, unless like it just reminds me more of like the elves in Lord of the Rings, where they live forever, and the only thing that can really kill them is, like you said, like they get their heads chopped off or something, and there's no real fear of death if they live normally. And that's why he was scared for his daughter getting married, because he knew she was going to lose her immortality. But on a Christian standpoint, I mean, I don't know how I'd.
Yeah, I got you. I'll share some of my thoughts. Maybe that'll make you want to respond, because I know I think you and Christian are both probably a little bit more conservative than I am when it comes to some of this. I grew up Pentecostal Baptist, kind of, mostly Pentecostal, but we were the Pentecostals that were very similar to Baptist, not the Pentecostals that are very liberal, which it's hard to make that distinction to people who haven't been in the Pentecostal world, but it's a thing, trust me. But growing up like that, I have always got the sense that it's almost like you wanted to die one day because it meant you were going to go to heaven, and everybody was living for the afterlife. was kind of the mind state of the Christian circles that I was in. Everybody was living for what happens after death. So we assumed death, but we assumed that death was not the end, that there was more after that. So it was like mortality light almost. And it was almost like not a disregard for this life, but it was almost like I felt pressured to not overvalue my life here and to, restrict myself now because one day I'll be in heaven. And that was just kind of how I grew up. I'm now, as I've become more universalist and I've kind of opened my eyes to other stuff, other Christian traditions and stuff, I feel more like there is a priority placed on how we live today. Not denying that there's something after this life, but more of a, no, God has me here for a reason, and I actually need to not value my time just because I need to be a good Christian and restrict myself, but also to enjoy my time. God gave me this life as a blessing, not just as a job. So I don't know. There's a lot of different ways that we look at the idea that we are finite, that we will die one day. And for me, I have found it better to appreciate the life I have now and not live as if this life doesn't matter. And when I put it onto this story, I'm thinking like, if you were immortal, you have to live as though this life matters because it's all you got. And then all of a sudden, when you're confronted with mortality, if you've always been immortal, you've never even thought of the afterlife. So then it's like, well, why are you living? What is the point of this life if it's going to end one day? Yeah, so that's just kind of how I think of these things, and just kind of I'm like, it is a pretty stark contrast. I don't know if religion will ever play a part in this particular comic series, but I'm interested, like, because a lot of religions focus on the afterlife, and if you've never had to face mortality, there is no afterlife. Think about,
The premise sounds, and it kind of brings back a human thing is the fear of death, and that kind of connects it to, I think, what the audience, we all kind of have that feeling also of mortality itself, and that's an interesting concept and a thought-provoking thing to introduce into the story.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see where it goes next, and I'm sure before the series finishes, I will probably bring it up on Comic Book Catch-Up or something later on. So, you guys want to know what happens to the story and you don't feel like reading it, you follow us long enough. I'll talk about it again, because I do really enjoy this series.
Hi, my name is TJ. I'm here to tell you about the Systematic Geekology shop. That's where we post all of our merch. It is hosted on Creator Spring, and we have a ton of really cool merch, mostly clothing. We have hats, extra soft t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies, and more. Our hosts wear them all the time. It's actually super comfy. We have glassware, mugs, which everybody loves a good mug. Fill out your cupboard. Get rid of some old ones, which is the part that I never do. That's why I have too many cups. We have cloth bags, posters, and it's really stuff. We like to put our icons on there. We like to put quotes, things we've come up with. And it's cool. It's a cool way. And a lot of it is pretty subtle too, to show support for one of your favorite shows. And my personal favorite is actually our SG dad cap, which I haven't been reluctant to buy it because now I have to wear hats at work, and then I get tired of wearing hats. But it's really cool. It's really understated. It is our logo right here, and then it says Systematic Geekology on the back. It's great. It's a really good hat. We have a few of them floating around. Check it out. And if we could all just rock the SG dad cap in public, I think that'd be pretty sweet.
But for now, we got to switch to maybe a more mainstream topic. One that I know John was really excited about. You and Will had jumped on and talked about the first few episodes together of season 3 of Star Wars Bad Batch. And I tried to watch the first couple of this season. I watched season 1 and 2. I've not got into this season yet. So I'm interested to see what you have to say. Real quick. Christian had another comment concerning mortality. All right, there's a fine balance between the two. Our home is heaven, but we need to take care of and respect the world we're in now like we would, so others can prosper and find heaven too. Yeah. I like that. I like that take. Even though we have different ideas of what heaven is and who goes to heaven, I do agree with Christian there. All right. Without further ado, season 3, Star Wars Bad Batch. John, what's this season about? What are you thinking about it? How would you rate it? Just give me a rundown.
So, Bad Batch season 3, I think, is, I want to say, filling in that gap of last little bit of the Clone Wars before A New Hope, and it's also explaining how Palpatine returned. I think that is kind of what it's setting up to do. It's doing a lot of world building, and it's kind of closing all of the story where season 1 and 2, closing those threads, so to speak. But I've really enjoyed it because you're getting more return or the characters like Crosshair, where he basically betrayed the main characters in the beginning in the season 1, and you're kind of seeing that story come to a close or come full circle as it may process through him eventually betraying the Empire, because even though he wanted to be a good soldier and follow orders, he realized that, at the end, they really didn't care that he followed orders. He was an expendable clone, and he helped, Omega escape, and he's having a real rough time getting back into his original crew because nobody trusts him because he did betray them. But at the same time, it's a lot of like, grown up themes and emotions that really are stirred by this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm curious about some of that too. As someone who has kids, do you think it's too grown up, or do you think it's still okay for kids, like relatable wise? Or
I think so. I think that it's definitely more serious. It's a lot more somber in tone and dark, especially in the beginning, like season 1, episode 1, where it starts with Omega in the jail cell, and it's dark. I mean, it's like Andor, but it's also something that brings up discussions that we really should have with our kids. It's like, what if a dark, oppressive government, took over the galaxy, and you get thrown in a jail. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on, like she's getting experimented on, and it's dark for kids. It's not like grotesque like the some other shows that we might discuss, but
yeah,
for it's definitely tame in terms of like violence and things, but it does bring up a lot of grown-up themes and things that kids not necessarily can relate to, but can experience. Kind of like when you're reading a book and you're reading like you can experience it and kind of relate to the characters by watching it. And I don't think that like Happy-Go-Lucky like these children Teletubby shows are doing them any favors.
Yeah,
by not kind of any adversity.
Yeah. No, I get that for sure. So one of the things I think is really interesting too is, for me, I really had a hard time with somehow Dave Filoni's going to use what, to me, this is still kind of like prequel material. I know it's not, but like just given the time era, that's kind of where I place it. And he's using this to kind of fill in the holes to make the sequel trilogy make more sense. I know we have different feelings on the sequels, but I think we both can agree The Rise of Skywalker was a mess. So I think it's fascinating that he really is able somehow to kind of lay the seeds to make Rise of Skywalker make a little tiny bit of sense. Not a lot of sense, but a little bit of sense. Like, it's starting to be like, okay, at least it doesn't feel completely out of nowhere if I add this. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sorry. Okay, I was going to say, I agree with that. I think that it is definitely... It's like the Rise of Skywalker or The Last Jedi and some of the other ones, which were just not done as great. I feel like they're laying the foundation for that better than what was built in the main trilogy.
Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't feel like it's just ignoring the main trilogy, because the main trilogy acknowledges the Clone Wars. It's just kind of different. Okay, another comment from Christian. This one I'm just going to let you respond to. Christian says, "I've got a feeling that Omega's going to be the only one left in the end." Sorry, he said, "I've got a bad feeling about this." Star Wars reference. Okay, or they might go down full downer in the end, and she's killed to fuel Palpatine's resurrection and for sequel synchronicity's sake. What do you think about this comment?
I feel like it's definitely going to be a bittersweet ending because I know that the clone uprising, we all know that's not going to be successful, and we know that Palpatine is going to end up resurrecting himself. So that's some part of that experimentation is going to be successful. His cloning facility on Mount Tantus is going to succeed because that's what creates The Last Jedi. It's what creates Snoke. It's what all that is built on, basically. But I'm not sold that she's going to die. I'm actually holding on to this really crazy, wild fan theory that she's going to be force sensitive and become the new canon's Mara Jade later on.
Yeah. No, I'm there for that. I think they're going to keep her around. I think she's too popular for Disney to let go of. There's some things that I hate when people are like, oh, Disney always does this, because usually they're wrong, and I can point to Disney has in fact not done that. Or like, oh, everything new Disney is woke, and I'm like, okay, but a lot of it isn't, or they've never had an original idea, and I'm like, Moana. They're like, well, that doesn't count because this. And I'm like, well, then literally none of the Disney movies count from the very beginning. You've never liked Disney. Sorry. Not to go on that whole side tangent. I do say, though, sometimes Disney does have a tendency to do a little bit of a fan, they feed the fans. If the fans like something, they're going to give it to them. And fans like Omega, so they're going to give us Omega. I don't think they're going to have Omega killed off. That said, one of the things that's interesting that it's going to relate to our next topic too, there does seem to be a little bit, from what I did see, of like the clones feel responsible for each other almost. Like, oh, you're also a default, or oh, you're this. The Empire did this to us, and it's almost like a brotherly commitment thing. And it's weird because you do have Cross-Eye, you do have all these clones that did, execute the order, turn on their brothers. So it's kind of like why do they still have this accountability for one another when literally the only thing they share is genetics? A lot of them haven't even met each other. So I always thought that was a little strange. Do you have any fuller ideas on some of these? Because again, I've only seen bits and pieces.
Well, I mean, they have that sense of brotherhood. Once Kamino was destroyed, they realized that they were it. They were the last ones, and it's kind of like a do or die. We need to be brothers now because we're all that's left.
Yeah. And I mean, and it makes sense. And what's interesting is even like Omega and I'm going to call them cloners, the people who do the clone testing stuff. I can't think of that species name, or I would just say that. But they even have a little relations there where there's like, she feels almost like she owes Omega to not out her abilities. And it definitely seems like, yeah, she must have some midichlorians, right? Like from what I've seen, even it's like, okay, they know that she's the key to something, and that's why they're hiding some of her genetic stuff from the test. Yeah. All right, cool. So if you had to rate season 3 so far, 0 to 10, where are you putting this one?
I'm putting this one at an 8. It feels like it's a little bit rushed. I love the ideas. I love all the character arcs coming full circle. I like the dark tone of it. But it does feel like it's a little bit rushed, like they're trying to stuff as much as they can into the last season because they know it's going to end.
Gotcha. Sometimes that can be fun, though, when all of a sudden everything just like all hits at once. But then sometimes it's terrible, and it's Spider-Man 3.
Endgame?
Yeah. A lot of people loved Endgame, and it's just Infinity War was better. I'm sorry. That's one of my bad opinions, I guess. But I loved Infinity War. What was I going to say? Okay, so as far as like the deeper themes, what do you think is like, as far as like what we can pull out of this and really think more about? What would you think would be the one of the biggest topics that you think we should maybe spend a little bit more time thinking about walking away from the show?
I think, if I had to die on a hill for the show, the theme would be redemption, because you think Crosshair and all these other characters are kind of finding their true selves in here. Like Hunter is having to wrestle with how with Crosshair's return, and also that he wasn't able to help Omega in the beginning, and then you've got Crosshair coming full circle from rejoining the crew after betraying the Empire, and then you've got Omega basically growing up and not being the wily kid that they brought on board, but now she's kind of, soldiered up a little bit.
Yeah. And our unofficial third host of the episode has said, "Preserving against evil, no matter the cost." I think that's pretty solid takeaway too from what I've seen.
He had time to prepare that statement.
Yeah, that's different. He gets to sit there and type his thoughts. All right, so on to our final main topic today. I'm actually really excited to talk about this. We've only got one episode in part 2 so far, but I love this show. I love the comic. I think Invincible is incredible. It's just a critique of all things that are superhero and comics, and what do we do with this genre, and how do we feel about the idea of heroes in the first place. It's a little bit less of a downer than The Boys. A lot less of a downer than The Boys. The Boys is just anyone who's a hero is evil. And I like The Boys, but I got to say, but Invincible. We had season 1, we had season 2, part 1, and the reason it was split up was because of the writer's strike. And now the writer's strike has been kind of resolved. We start to see part 2, and we talked about some of the other episodes and stuff here before, so you guys know some of my history with it. I've read all the comics. I love the show. Watched all of it so far. John, what's your relation with this? Have you seen any of Invincible or read any of the comics or anything?
I've not read the comics. I watched the first episode of season 1, and I thought it was absolutely disgusting and terrible and overly gory, and I immediately shut it off. And it's just not my cup of tea. The way that the grotesque violence. Like there was a scene where like somebody was like, "Help me," crawling in the background, and then they got stomped on and squished and blood spattered everywhere. And I was just like, you know what? I'm not really into this type of thing. It's the same problem I had with Rick and Morty. It was just overly grotesque.
Oh. So you definitely would not like the first episode of part 2 of season 2. Part of my commentary was mostly,
probably not.
The show's been pretty mild up until now, in my opinion. Comparatively, I feel like we've had some grotesque moments like what you mentioned, but we haven't had characters that we've known and grown attached to really get brutally murdered until now. Now there's characters that we have known and spent time with and maybe even started to care for, and we see them smashed to bits, literally. We've seen one eaten, and it's like, oh. I think the grotesqueness is part of the point of just kind of like superheroes aren't just pow and somebody's knocked out. It's someone with that much super strength punches someone, they explode. That is what would happen. All right, Christian has to hate on The Boys because it's just what he does. Nihilistic trash. What he means is a fantastic, brilliant show compared to the more realistic take that Invincible offers, compared to the more cartoony take that Invincible offers. In its destruction of superheroes, deconstruction. Sorry, it helps that Invincible also reconstructs the genre as well. He is right about that. The Boys is just a downer. Shrinking Ray? Oh, yeah, I haven't got to that part yet. Shrinking Ray's death lives rent-free in my head. A truly frightening scene. Yeah, this was rough. So in the show so far, you have Omni-Man, who is basically Superman, and in that episode 1 you mentioned, which happens a lot later in the comics, we end up seeing that he is from another planet, just, same story script of Superman, except for his planet wants to completely conquer our world. So he just brutally murdered all of the Justice League in his world. That, again, they're not called Justice League, but you can kind of tell. There's literally like people who look exactly like the Flash and all that, and they just get destroyed. Anyway, season 1 ends. You find out you have the giant fight scene between Omni-Man and Invincible. And, Invincible kind of wins, sort of. Omni-Man flies away, and we think we're never going to see him again. He says a bunch of really nasty stuff. Christian's making fun of me. But anyway, they have a whole big outing. Season 2's been wrestling with how should he feel about his dad? Should he hate his dad forever? Should he want to see his dad again? Because, they are family, even though his dad is truly a despicable creature who did terrible things to his mother and left the planet and tried to literally destroy his planet. And then how do they continue on without his dad? And, they have like this PTSD, all this trauma that they're dealing with. At the end of part 1, he ends up going to a planet that's filled with like these bug species people, the Thraxans, and who's there except for his own dad? And finds out that he has a stepbrother at the end of part 1 of season 2. Part 2 happens. Also the alien race that him and his father are, the Viltrumites. I'm probably saying that wrong, but Christian can correct me in the comments because that's what he does. Christian's watching this like, why do we let Josh on this show? Anyway, the Viltrumites, they show up. They're like, hey, you haven't prepared this planet. What the heck? They attack Omni-Man and Invincible. They take Omni-Man away for execution and tell Invincible it's his job to kind of get the planet ready for being destroyed. And Invincible's like, yeah, I'm not playing into this species thing that's going on. Like, I'm not part of this race. I'm a human. I'm from Earth. That's where my allegiances are. All this kind of stuff. But his dad's taken away to be executed, supposedly, that because he's changed and all this stuff. Man, yeah, it's complicated when aliens get involved and other species and stepfathers and step aliens and brothers and all this stuff gets involved. It's complicated. The Thraxans, the alien bug race that his brother is part of, they have very short lifespans. Their whole lifespan is like just a few years. So what happens now that his dad's taken away is his half brother, if he lives there, his mom will die in a few years and he will not. So he can either leave his brother there to watch everyone around him constantly die and him feel, you're dealing with that mortality thing. Everyone else is dying and you're just still around because you're aging so much slower. Or he can bring his half brother back to Earth, which is what he decides to do. But he doesn't have a way to raise his stepbrother. He's still a kid. His mom doesn't want to raise this other man who, her ex-husband who tried to destroy her planet and call her a pet. She doesn't want to raise his kid. So it's kind of like you're dealing with this. What responsibility do they actually have to this half-brother? Because obviously good people don't want to leave someone you're related to watch everyone around them die. But also there's no responsible way to care for them. And also, why should other people be picking up after Omni-Man, who's just a douchebag who goes around creating, little babies everywhere or alien children? So it's kind of like, you have all these complications. And then on top of that, Earth gets threatened with 2 major crises at once. Invincible goes with one team. The other team is left behind. Invincible's team's fighting basically Starro kind of creatures, whatever. The other team, man, you have Shrinking Ray, Multicate, and the Speedster, whose name I forget, which is embarrassing because he's the only one that lived of the 3. And yeah, they brutally murdered. Multicates, they have the multiplying power where there's multiple of them over and over, literally get smashed together into each other so that their organs and stuff are out. Shrinking Ray gets swallowed and tries to expand, like, haha, I'm going to expand in your throat and kill you. And nope. Gets swallowed and then her blood kind of just gets spat up a little bit. And it's like, ooh, yummy. And these are characters we've actually grown to know. So that's different. That's awful. Sorry, duplicate. That's what I said. It's duplicate, isn't it? Didn't I say duplicate? John doesn't know either.
Now I've got questioning everything.
I couldn't remember. Anyway, I know a lot of story is one episode so far, but man, they unpacked a lot.
I think you said multicate.
Multicate? Yeah, that sounds right. Duplicate's right. Okay. Anyway, duplicate makes more sense anyway. Just where the show's going and just like how they're dealing with this idea of like responsibility and accountability of like, who are you accountable for? Who are you responsible for? Do you actually have to, like, if your family is going around messing up stuff in the world, do you have to go up back and clean up after them? And like, why would it be your responsibility in the first place? And it's one of those where like, it's so far-fetched that it's like, we shouldn't be able to relate to this at all. And yet I feel like it is very relatable. We have had situations of like, and I know people just because, I work in like food and stuff where I've seen people who've like, they're still a teenager, but feel like they have to take care of their little brother because their parents just are not capable of caring for children, and it's like, well, they're not your child. So what responsibility do you have to that? And yet at the same time, if you just leave them, you know how bad that's going to be for them. So you can't do that either. So I really feel like this question of accountability that shows up first in the Clone Wars, right? Because like, are you accountable for the other clones that did these terrible things? Are you accountable, or should you still care for, your brother if he backstabbed you? And then we see the same kind of questions in this series of, is Invincible, is he accountable for his half alien brother? Because he didn't tell his dad to go do all those terrible things, and yet he still feels a sense of responsibility. So I guess if I had to rate Invincible Season 3, Part 2 so far, that first episode, man, I love the comics. I think they did a really good job copying that. And just, I'm excited about the story and seeing where it's going. I'm going to give it a 10. I hate giving things 10s, but I'm going to give it a 10. I thought it was perfectly executed, really interesting story that, even though I kind of know where it goes, I'm still excited to watch other people who are not going to read the comics, who are going to watch the show, see how they react to what happens next. I'm excited for that, to have more conversations around the themes here. John, how do you, whenever we think of like, and I know as a dad, you probably have a different perspective of me. How do you think of like how do we decide what we're responsible and what we're accountable for? And is it different for Christians than non-Christians, do you think? Or is this like everyone has to just kind of deal with this in their own way?
One has a sense in regards to children, or what information, whether if you're teaching them about the world, you're giving them adversity or explaining, not everything's going to go the way you want. Most of the time, to pay bills, have nice things and conveniences like electricity or a roof over your head and clothing and all these things that are provided for you we provide it free of charge because we're your parents, but in the future, you have to provide that for yourself. And I want them to understand that, because I feel like, I didn't get a lot of that growing up or learning about taxes and all these other things, car payments and bills and stuff. And I want my kids to grow up for that. And I'm responsible for that. But I feel like I am responsible if I don't teach them well, or if I ignore them, or just let YouTube babysit them. I need to be monitoring their content, making sure that they're being fed good information. But in regards to like if they go and make decisions, or if they turn out to be bad people, if you do what you're supposed to do, and I don't hold myself to being like, well, I can't make sure that they come out perfect, but do what you can, do everything to self of, if they just turn out rotten, it's like, all right, and it wasn't my fault,
Yeah. No, I get that. I just, man, it is rough. And I think part of my problem here is like, we are both people who aren't dealing with some of this. I guess like when it concerns like, I'm not being asked to raise somebody else's kid who I hate. So it kind of feels weird to me to be like, oh yeah, no, he should totally take responsibility for that. Cause like I've never been in that position. So I feel weird commenting on it. I do like the Spider-Man, the thing of like, if you have great power, you have great responsibility, right? Like I think if it's within your ability to help others and you watch others suffer instead, then I think some kind of wrong has been done there. So when I think of like Invincible situation, it's a little bit complicated because he doesn't really have the power or the capability to raise this half brother. So I'm not sure if he's really responsible because he doesn't have the ability to do that. So it gets a little bit more complicated. But, if it was just a clear, hey, you have all the money, you have all the ability to care for this person, I don't think it matters how terrible your dad is. If you are fully capable of helping this child who's going to be raised terribly and in misery, and you just decide not to because it's inconvenient and you don't like their dad, I don't like that decision. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's all about
what you're capable of helping, yeah.
Yeah, like if I want to, do I want to raise my kids or and spend the time with them, or or not? If I'm able to, do it. But if you're, it's different if you're not able to.
So this is actually a question that I wrestle with. I'm going to give a really specific example that's real life, so maybe we can talk about it a little bit better. In one ministry I care a lot about, and we have on my other podcast, the Whole Church Podcast, we've invited them on a couple different times, the Watoto Ministry. So it's a ministry in Uganda that helps children, and it doesn't just like babysit children and teach them how to be like white Christian Americans. It raises them and have them become the worship leaders and uses their culture with Christianity to kind of show how to be Christian. And it's in a part of the world that's desperately in need of help, that needs food, that needs support, right? And the way it works is like people are able to adopt a child, which is, I think it's like $40, and 3 people adopt the same child. It's complicated, but you're sending money to sponsor these children. My parents did it. I don't know the organization well enough that I'm confident that what they're doing is good, and I do want to sponsor and support a child. However, I currently, given my current budget, I am like, can I pay the bills? And if I feel like I'm at the bridge of can I pay the bills, I don't think it's responsible or reasonable for me to then go, well, I'm also going to spend $50 a month adopting this child. Now, some people will say, if you're convicted, you just have to do it. It doesn't matter if it makes sense or not. I guess it depends how you define convicted. But that's where I'm seeing this problem as, to me, it's just do I have the means to help, less than any of the other questions. I think that's the main question that I have to wrestle with when it comes to what accountability I take of others who are not myself. But I'm sure other people have other ways that they value it that aren't just, do I have the ability to care? But for me, that's the only question that really stands in my way, is what means do I have to help? Yeah. John, what do you think? Do you have any other thoughts on that, or anything you want to add to that kind of part of the conversation of like, how do we take accountability for others, and what responsibility do we have for people outside of our own self?
I feel like it's just another human aspect of us wanting to feel responsible for, if someone, like one of our best friends goes out and does something terrible, and we feel kind of responsible, but even though we didn't have any part of it, we wonder if we could have gone back and done something differently. And I feel like that's just, us wishing things could have been different.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. It's true. Yeah. It's a complicated thing. It's not something we're going to easily answer here. And let us know if you're listening and you're a better theologian than us, and you're like, no, here's the exact verse that defines what responsibility we have to the other and accountability we have for others' children's. Drop it in the comments. Let me know. I would love to know exactly how, the exact formula for how I decide what I'm accountable for. But I think for the most part, that's just a question that humans have been wrestling with ever since we've kind of developed the idea of ethics, and we'll probably be wrestling with it for the rest of time, if I had to guess. But that's a fun note to end on. Christian loves when I just end with open-ended questions. You're welcome, Christian. Here's another one. How do we define who we're accountable for? I don't have an answer, so we're going to just wrap this one up. All right, so for our wrap-up on our What's News episodes, John, we pick one of the things we discussed today. It doesn't have to be a main topic. It could be one of the things from the lightning round if you want it to be. If you had to pick one thing to recommend to our listeners of everything that we talked about today, which one would you pick?
I would say, if you haven't seen One Piece, I highly recommend the anime, starting from season 1. Not the new coming out with. I have to verify if it's any good or not. But like the remakes. I'm not a big fan of remakes of good stories. I'd rather them remake bad movies or bad TV shows that were based on good stories, instead of remaking shows that we know and love, or movies that we know and love. But tangent aside, I recommend the One Piece anime because there's a lot of character depth, and I just really, it's a lot of fun. It's kind of like watching Pokemon. It's just really lighthearted, even though the first bit of the season is a little bloody. I wouldn't recommend that for really, really young children. But Luffy being so lighthearted and fun, it really does make the anime really endearing and enjoyable.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I'm also not going to pick one of our main 3 topics. I'm also going to pick a lightning round topic. I'm going to say Twisted Metal, because I haven't heard enough people talk about it. I think more people should watch it. Even though, some of the other stuff we talked about is better. I just want more people to watch it so I can talk about it. Anyway, Christian is still antagonizing me, but I'm not going to give him the satisfaction of reading any more of his comments. I will say, Twisted Metal's great. Hunger in the Dust by G. Willow Wilson, also great. But Twisted Metal, more people should be watching it. So if you like action and you like, kind of juvenile humor, watch that series. Talk to me. If you like evil clowns and cars with guns, watch it. Let me know what you think. I'm excited to talk to literally anyone about it. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping this one up, guys. Again, a thank you to Justin Vaughn for sponsoring the show. You rock, man. If you guys are listening, please consider rating and reviewing our show on Podchaser, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Of course, smash that like and subscribe button. We need you to do that, especially if you're on YouTube. It really helps a whole lot. If you want to listen or see other What's News episodes, down below, we have in the description, we have a link to see the rest of those kind of things. It's a good time. And finally, I need you all to do one very important thing for us. And remember that we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
Did you know Systematic Geekology has a YouTube channel? Now you do. And while you're there, you can see exclusive stuff like our comic book catch-up series, Manga Mustard, Drinks with Tejas, the companion series to our annual theme. You can go Friday Night Frights with me, where I go through cryptozoology, ufology, and more. You can also go to see Spidey Swing-Bys, where I'm doing every chronological appearance by release of Spider-Man from Amazing Fantasy 15 all the way to the modern age. You can also find exclusive shorts on YouTube there, as well as other bonuses for extra episodes that we do that don't end up on the podcast proper. So I want to see you over there on YouTube.
Hello, friends. If you like Systematic Geekology, then there's a host of other podcasts in our network that we think you will like just as much. And so we're part of the Anazao Ministry Podcast Network, and we hope that you can hop over and subscribe with all the podcasts that are on our network. Like, for instance, The Homily, which is, Pastor Will Rose's sermon here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. You have another podcast called The Whole Church Podcast, the OG, the originals, the beginner of it all. Yes, Joshua, Noel, and TJ working for unity among the church and having great conversations with the wide spectrum of those who are involved in Christian ministry and the church. You have My Seminary Life by Brandon Knight, who's discussing what he's learning in seminary, he is learning his theological studies and bringing to the surface those big things that we're wrestling with and thinking through theologically in the church and beyond. There's the Let Nothing Move You podcast from Christian Ashley, who is walking through the Bible in a very Bible study type fashion and walking through the biblical narrative. You have Dummy for Theology. I don't think Joshua is a dummy, but hey, he's going to lift up theological themes that he's thinking about and wrestling with. And maybe there's not a lot of answers, but there's definitely a lot of great questions out there that he's lifting up with some great theologians across the whole spectrum of Christianity. And then there's the Bible After Hours. Man, if you like to get risky, if you like to get controversial, there's this foul-mouthed preacher who goes through the Bible from a more progressive point of view, challenging the status quo of the modern church. Yeah, you don't want any kids around with that podcast. And then you have the Clydes, one of my favorite couples that I like to listen to. One of the hosts here on Systematic Geekology, Taylor and Elizabeth Clyde, go through weekly discussions and kind of a devotional, conversational method of what's going on in their lives, where they see God moving in their lives, and what God is up to in the world. So those are the podcasts, a part of the AMP network. Subscribe, follow. We hope you can be a part of all that great network with the wonderful podcasts at AMP.